Congresswoman, thank you again for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you ahead of the State of the Union tonight. So there are a lot of topics that will be on the table. Affordability probably being at the top of the list. So we have a lot of Americans right now who are really feeling the cost of living. They are feeling the crisis that we are in. What are some real tangible things that everyday Americans can look to the Trump administration and say, okay, if they do that thing, that will mean that they are really serious about affordability?
I mean, the president ran on addressing the cost of living, right? He said he was going to bring costs down on day one. And then now he's trying to say that affordability is a Democratic hoax. And, frankly, I
Right.
think he's going to lie and tell us that everything is great when the fact of the matter is, like, he can't gaslight us out of our own experience. We know that shit is too expensive right now.
Right.
Um, I was hoping that actually he would come and have some bold ideas around housing and childcare and other things that we know are so important. But so far, he hasn't done any of that. And instead, he's kicked millions of people off of Medicaid. He's refused to extend the ACA premium tax credits, also that he could fund tax cuts for his billionaire friends. And, not only that, he is like insistent on enacting these tariffs um, that are illegal, by the way, which even this Supreme Court has
Fully.
said,
Yeah.
that are just making costs for Americans even higher.
Right. You mentioned that he'll stand up and lie. So bearing that in mind, what is the state of the union right now in your eyes? What are the major topics we're looking at, and how is America doing? I mean, obviously it's easy for me to be like everything is fucked. Like I hate it here. But from your eyes as somebody who is serving in our government, what is the state of the union right now?
Look, I think the State of the Union is really scary right now, right? The State of the Union is small businesses not knowing if they're going to be able to make it because of the tariffs and then the uncertainty of the tariffs. It's families being too afraid to go to the grocery store or to school or to the hospital or to report a crime because they're so worried about what might happen to them. It's our neighbors being disappeared. It's millions of people losing their health care, all while no one can afford anything. And Donald Trump is starting wars all over the place.
Yeah.
But the State of the Union is also everyone who's come out and made their voice heard across this country over the past year. It's also people braving the cold in Minneapolis, looking out for their neighbors. That is also the state of our union. And we are not in the majority here in Congress, but we are the majority in the country and we are not powerless. And our voices do matter. And when we speak up and when we speak together, we are actually able to make change.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about we may not be the majority in Congress, but we are the majority in the United States. I just saw a post today on Instagram that said that this account thinks that the word of the year will be neighborly for
Yeah.
2026, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I don't think that I have ever been more floored by just kind of the acts of kindness that I've seen online and in my own community from people taking care of their neighbors.
Well, that's
Minneapolis,
exactly
case in
right.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And like, so my background's actually in international conflict resolution. That's what I did before I came to Congress. And what we actually know is that, in countries that are even more torn apart than ours is, the way you come back together is at that really local level. So when people will call me and they're so overwhelmed with what's happening at the federal level, I tell them, like, go pick up trash, go check on a neighbor, go paint the playground at your park. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be bottom up, like neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, that we rebuild the fabric of our society. It's
Hmm.
not going to come from the top down. And it's been so amazing to see people all across the country, in my community in San Diego, like really stepping up for each other and doing that and being neighborly.
Yeah, absolutely. That was literally just going to be my next question to you was what are the tangible steps that everyday Americans can take to sort of feel like they have some sense of control right now? And I think on the local level, that is, I just made a post on Instagram recently talking about local elections, how that is, with the midterms coming up, that's like the number one place that people can begin to get involved and see actual tangible change in their everyday lives. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Um, A
Local
lot.
elections, the midterm elections, call
Yeah.
your members of Congress, but also all of that mutual aid we can do for each other. Like, you
Hmm.
probably have a neighbor who's an immigrant who's really worried about going outside right now. Make sure they have the groceries they need, offer to take their kid to school, right? Like, there's so many things we can be doing because we do have agency.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my like favorite things, the trends that's going on TikTok right now is the trend of like hope core and realizing that we actually do have a lot of agency in our day-to-day lives, even though it can feel really exhausting and polarizing when we're looking at kind of like the big picture, but to kind of zoom in a little bit, I think can be really useful. So I love you mentioning that. So there are a lot of Congress members who are skipping the State of the Union tonight. Thoughts, feelings on that? What are the vibes of people who have decided to not go? My
Yeah,
congressman
so
has opted not to attend.
yeah, so I'm skipping too. Honestly, I don't need to sit there and listen to Donald Trump lie to me for an hour and a half.
Totally.
Like, I've got better things to do. I'm going to be spending time with the people who've been impacted by Trump's policies, the Epstein survivors, people who've been kicked off of Medicaid, immigrants. But I also have a lot of colleagues who are going and are bringing really important guests, like people who've been impacted in Minneapolis, like Epstein survivors. And so,
Yeah.
I think all of us are trying to make the best decision about how we stand up for our constituents, how we stand up for our communities, but we're all united in knowing that the State of the Union under Donald Trump is not thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really quick, I'd love to touch on women's healthcare because I know that this is a really important topic for you and something you've done a lot of work on introducing legislation. Um, and I love that you introduce. Now I'm going to blank on the name of it, of course, but the data.
My body, my data.
Yes, my body, my data. I loved that. I thought that was brilliant. Which has now been enacted in both Washington and California.
That's
Right?
right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
amazing. Okay, so there's been kind of some chatter online about this sort of like Project 2026 baby that might be afloat. And obviously we saw a lot of what was listed in Project 2025, especially as it relates to women's reproductive care come to fruition. So I think a lot of women are I'm in Illinois. I'm pregnant right now, but still,
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm like breathing so heavy into the mic like all the time. So apologies for that. But I think that like a lot of women, even in blue states, are understandably really concerned about, any additional action that the Trump administration might take on a federal level for abortion rights. So, I'm curious to know just kind of like, how these abortion bans end up impacting people who both do and do not want children.
Yeah. So, like, the way I think about reproductive healthcare, reproductive freedom is the full range of access to reproductive healthcare. So that means
Right.
if you do want a child, that means if you don't want a child.
Hmm.
And so, for instance, one of the things that I'm fighting for is to get TRICARE, the military insurance program, to cover IVF and fertility treatments, because I think we also need to make sure that as part of reproductive freedom, people have access to the fertility treatments that they need.
Yeah.
Um, but look, I represent California, and a lot of times I'll hear from my constituents, from voters, like, "Oh, why are you talking about abortion so much? It's protected here in California." Well, the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, like, they want a federal abortion ban. They've told us they want a federal abortion ban. And a federal abortion ban would take away your right to abortion, even if you live in Illinois or California.
Hmm.
But
Right.
even below that, they are trying to make it so that you don't have access to mifepristone, which is a key medicine needed for medication abortion. They're trying to make it illegal for people to seek access to care in other states. It also means those of us who live in states that do have access to abortion still, the wait times are really impacted because people are now having to come from far away, and we don't have enough providers to be able to provide them with the care that they need. Our We also know that, like, it's going to impact down the road, like, medical students are not getting trained in how to do DNCs, right?
Yep.
That's going to
Hmm.
impact all of us. And like, we've even seen that in like some states, full maternity wards are just closing because they're too afraid of the potential like legal implications of providing
Yeah.
regular medical care, and people are literally bleeding out in parking lots.
Hmm. Right, right. I just read from the Chicago Abortion Fund that One in four abortions that happen across the United States actually happen in Illinois, which I thought was a crazy stat, and that 39% of abortions that happen in the state of Illinois happen for out of state residents. So they're actually people who are traveling here. So I find that really fascinating that the implications of banning abortion, really we aren't conceptualizing how that is going to impact the states that do have more reproductive healthcare available for women. So yeah, I think that's such an important topic that not a lot of people are really addressing, is how that's going to impact the states that do have these kind of less strict reproductive care rights for women. So now, in terms of the healthcare data of it all, so again, another area that you're incredibly fluent in, and an area I'm kind of like obsessed with learning about, because ever since sort of like Peter Thiel and like all of the Palantir and all of that, I say as I like have an aura ring on right now, but like
Same. It's okay. It's a
literally, yeah,
Finnish
I'm like
company, so they're subject to the
perfect.
European data laws.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. Great to know. So, yeah, I say that as, somebody who's like very interested in like this health data. What are some things that maybe we can expect moving forward from the Trump administration as it relates to women's reproductive data or women's healthcare data more broadly?
Yeah, so I think there's a common misconception. People think that anything medical is protected by HIPAA or medical data privacy laws, and it's not true, right? Period tracking apps, Aura rings, um,
Hmm.
you know, Google searches, location data, none of that is protected by HIPAA, even if what you're searching is medical information. And so that's actually why I introduced the bill, My Body, My Data Act. You'll appreciate that in introducing it, I had to explain to my colleagues that we track our periods and that there are apps that help us track our periods. And I became the first person in House history to talk about my own period on the House floor.
I read that. I was like, that's so cool.
Yes. But, if we're not talking about these things, we're not making good policy about them.
Right.
And we know that this kind of data is what they're using to prosecute people. So actually, like, it's very hard for a doctor to really be able to tell if you're having a natural miscarriage or a medication abortion. And so the only way they can really tell is by going to your data and seeing if you searched access to abortion, if you visited an abortion clinic, if you ordered pills online. In Nebraska, they actually used private Facebook messages between a mom and her daughter to prosecute someone for seeking an abortion that was
Wow.
illegal under state law. And so, like, these abortion things they're trying to do, these abortion laws, like, they have real implications for our data privacy. And now we know that they're also using the same kind of very intrusive data to target people who have gone to ICE protests, to really surveil Americans. And it's really dangerous and scary. And it's like, it's not dystopian or theoretical. I know it feels like that, but it's actually
Right.
happening right
Hmm.
now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's easy to kind of look at everything that's going on and not make comparisons to obviously like very blatant historical events that have occurred. And it's I think it's easy to say, well, no, that would never happen here. That would, and it's like it is happening though. That's the problem. That's what I think a lot of Americans who maybe aren't as immersed in politics, or who maybe don't keep up with the news or whatever, maybe don't understand about a lot of this. So on that note, speaking to those Americans who, maybe don't have as much of a grasp of like what's going on. And, I'm like constantly reading the news, which is like a really terrible habit, and 10 out of 10 don't recommend for everybody. But for those Americans who are not doing that, what what do you hope lands with them tonight after the State of the Union?
I hope and I think that Americans will see that Donald Trump is looking out for his billionaire friends and himself and
Hmm.
enriching himself off this presidency. He's not looking out for them. He's not done anything to bring down the cost of living. In fact, he's made it more expensive. He's not actually going after the worst of the worst and the criminals. He's going after our neighbors and the people who work in our grocery stores and our restaurants. He's not actually making us safer. He's making us less safe. and he is kicking people off their health care in order to pay for tax cuts for his rich friends. That's who he's here for. That's who he's looking out for. And that's what I think the American people will see tonight.
Right. And hopefully see that and take that energy and hopefully whatever emotion that sparks in them and take it to the polls for the midterms. So that I think is the number one hope for sure.
That's right. In the wise words of Nancy Pelosi, don't agonize, organize.
Love that. Amazing. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here with me and thank you for answering my questions. Sending you all of the sanity that I possibly can ahead of the State of the Union tonight. And thank you again for taking time out of your day to be here with us.
Of course. Thank you so much.